Imagine this, if you will. There's a fairly cute kid, and they live in your standard middle-class suburban housing estate. They have long blonde hair that falls just below their shoulders. They play with brats. They wear pink pajamas. They sing, they dance, they cry, they hug. They're sensitive. Visualize that person I'm describing fully to you. Close your eyes if it helps. Can you see what they look like? Can you see their smiling face? Now, what would you want to say or want to do or want to feel if I told you that that little kid wearing girls' clothes and playing with girls' toys was actually me? Now, don't get me wrong. I was very content in myself. But I'm also very aware that I lived in a bubble. My parents didn't mind how I was, how I expressed my emotions, or who or what I played with. So long as I was content being me, they were happy. But I would be kidding myself if I were to believe that this was the same in households across the board. Because there was a visible element of discomfort when my friend and I would stroll in through the entrance of our housing estate, having come from our local village, kitted out in whatever women's clothes we could get our hands on in the local charity shop. Because upon entrance, we would almost always be greeted by the same group of boys who would be sitting on their bikes, armed with varying models of Nerf gun, and who would almost instantaneously just start hurling whatever expletive-laden insults they could manage to muster up at my friend and I. Now, we were fine. We thought that we looked fabulous. So we weren't fazed by their negative actions and attitudes in the slightest. My friend actually did go on to be a very successful drag queen, so it paid off for him in the long run. But what was so worrying was that this animosity and these attitudes didn't end with these kids. Their parents, or some of them anyway, expressed the same sentiments. And while I really did have some fantastic neighbors, they were also visibly unnerved by my level of freedom and my level of self-expression. And they dismissed it. They dismissed me as a product of liberal parenting. Because it is so much easier to do that than face up to your own fears and your own insecurities and admit that you have a problem. That we have a problem. That society has a problem with how we view boys' behavior and their subsequent level of self-expression. And for better or for worse, I grew out of this as a result of an epiphany of self-awareness credited to the restrictions that society places on what a boy can and cannot do, wear, or show interest in. Otherwise, a theory which has been very nicely coined, the man box, which is this very narrow-minded scope of what a male should be, the attributes they should display, how they should project themselves to society, or exactly just what makes them a man. It contains the usual connotations of being tough and being controlling and domineering and athletic, and most importantly, showing very little emotion, maybe with the exception of anger. And society does a really good job of reinforcing this toxic mentality from the very first day we are brought into this world, when we are swiftly pigeonholed on the basis of gender, and it only really snowballs from there. Boys are placed in blue, girls in pink. Boys are given monster trucks for Christmas, while their sisters are given one of those easy bake ovens. And as a kid, I very often found myself wandering into the girls' aisles in toy shops. And the one thing that always struck me was this explosion of pink. No matter where I was or what toy shop I was in, that pastel-y sort of rainbow hue of colors that came from the top of the aisle meant that you were definitely in the female section. And it was a similar but rather inversed situation for the boys' toys. It was just this dark sort of cavern of blues and browns. And what is this teaching kids? I know I'm only talking about the color of packaging, but if you go up close and you examine the branding of children's toys, you'll notice how almost all girls' toys portray them as delicate fashionistas and loving, gentle carers. And the boys' toys, or my toys as you would, depict us as these fighting machines who need to save the world. Kids are being brought up with very fixed images of how men and women and boys and girls should be. Girls' roles in society are formed through princess role models of being pretty and being appealing, while boys are placed into these rigid boxes and told to be strong, and told to be tough, and told to be brave, or face being called a wimp, or even worse, a girl. As a society, we've become so obsessed with hyper-femininity and hyper-masculinity. And this is a direct result of the power of advertising. Companies realized that if they segregated the market on the basis of gender, they could double their profits. Instead of selling just one particular toy to siblings in a family, you could sell a blue one to the boy and a pink one to the girl. And while this was good for their annual turnover, it had very bad implications on the rest of society as it only fed into these constricting gender roles. Sex is a biological term. It refers to the type of chromosomes you have. 2X being female, XY being male. But gender is a social construct and something that can be measured on a spectrum. Some days you may feel more masculine, other days more feminine. But ultimately, it's fluid. And as a result, men and women are far more the same and far more human than they are different. And I guess that's all I'm really trying to do, is to ask us all, as human beings, to accept each other for being just that, being human, and to not let the differences and labels that so often divide us define us as individuals. Because at the end of the day, we all have emotions. We all have moments of vulnerability. These attributes cannot be given to one gender over another. They're merely part of the shared human experience. But these stereotypes that we have created, they're unhealthy, they're isolating, they're very unnatural, and they generate harmful outlooks towards sexuality and towards gender. And I often wonder, what I would do in a utopian, accepting world where people are judged on the basis of merit and on the basis of kindness, and not on the basis of skin color or gender or what bathroom you choose to use or what clothes you want to wear. Because ultimately, we are all human. And it's when I become saddened by the expectations of society that I think back to when I was a little kid and when I was a lot more flamboyant. And I do so with a sense of nostalgia and a sense of admiration that I was so resilient against a system that so desperately wanted to box me. And I continued on regardless of the negative attitudes that were sometimes expressed. Because humanity is a wonderful spectrum of color, and our differences and our individuality should be celebrated, not suppressed. Thank you very much.